What's up, Average Joes? Today, I want to talk about my top books of 2021. So, how's it going? And welcome back. Today, I'm talking about my top books of 2021. Thank you guys for coming back for another video, subscribing, liking, doing all the good things. And yeah, if you've been watching my channel for a while, some of these won't be a surprise to you. So, we're going to get into it. And as of right now, I have read 76 books this year. I should read at least 2 more by the end of the year, as right now, something like that. I don't really care about my yearly books read, annual goal, things like that. It's more of a priority, what I have read and want to get to. So I'm going to break these down. I will have these broken down into fantasy, sci-fi, mystery, and thriller. Fantasy, sci-fi, mystery, thriller, nonfiction. They'll be labeled down below. I didn't set it as like my top 10, my top 15. I just want to talk about my favorite books. I make the rules here, so that's what I'm going to do. So fantasy, and it's also in chronological order. As I keep a notes list in my phone, and every time I read a book, I write it down in the notes list. So I was just going down my notes list, and yeah. So fantasy, Rise of Empire. This is one of the first one that I read, and I count this. This is technically 2 books. It's in Revelations. It is the second book. It's the second binding in the Raya Revelations trilogy, but it's the middle 2 books, book 2, 3, and 4, if that makes sense. If you know, you know. Rise of Empire, it was fantastic. I absolutely love Royce and Hadrian and the Raya world. I'm going to be continuing that, finishing up the Revelations next year at some point in time. I don't know when. But what's great about the series is that you can take long breaks. You can put it down and pick it back up way down the road because it's so easy to get into. And I mean, the stories are always fantastic. The characters are great, but it is so easy to just jump right into and go back and forth. So Rise of Empire is the first one. Ash and Sand. I've talked about this series a lot. It starts off with Kings of Paradise. I read the entire trilogy this year, and it went right to my number 3 spot in my all-time favorite fantasy series. So when I made that video, I'll be making that video again at some point later on in 2022. But as right now, Ash and Sand is up there. It is fantastic. Other people that I've been reading it recently have really, really liked it as well. So I keep recommending it to people, and I still think everybody should check it out. All 3 books are on Kindle Unlimited. The plot is so smart and well thought out that, in the first book, you have these 2 POVs, and they're very far away from each other, and they don't meet. They don't even meet in the first book. But then when you get to the second book, you get so much more background story and information and connections, and like deep connections that, somebody in the beginning of the first book shows up somewhere in the second book and how they got there. And, it's really, really well thought out and good. You could tell Richard Nell planned the entire trilogy from start to finish, and then was like, okay, and then released. It wasn't like yeah, I'm gonna write the first book, and then then I'll write the second book, and then I'll release these, and then I'll just fill in the third book when I get to it. Mortal Techniques, but I'm specifically going to talk about Spirits of Vengeance, which I just read recently. I recently came out with a why you should read the Mortal Techniques as well. I also have that about Ash and Sand, but Spirit of Vengeance is really, really good. One thing that I think I forgot to mention in that video was that Spirits of Vengeance is basically The Witcher, but in like an East Asian style, like a Japanese style Witcher, except he's vanquishing and sending spirits back. The magic is really, really awesome, and how deep it goes into the magic and how fleshed out the characters are. It's much longer than the rest of the Mortal Techniques books, but it is so well done, and the characters are fleshed out. There's comedy, there's sad parts, there's awesome action, high drama, and another good ending. So Mortal Techniques, I highly recommend you starting that series. But Spirits of Vengeance, if you just want a one-off, that's fine to start with, and then you can go to the other ones if you're liking the universe. Dragonfire Following. This is book 2 in the Shadow of the Apt series. Just recently finished book 4. I think Dragonfire Following was my favorite, and that's, some people didn't like it as much, but I'm a much more of a plot-driven person, and the plot was very high paced there. There were 2 sieges and a lot of other things that happened. I've had small issues with each book, especially like one character that just is terrible at everything, and she just sucks in general, but that's besides the point. The plot and the world and what Adrian has built, with between magic and technology and so many things going on where it's almost too much stuff going on. But Dragonfire Following was awesome. Then to finish up the fantasy, I'm going to go with Deadbeat. Had to bring in a Dresden book here. I think I read 3 Dresden books this year, but Deadbeat was remembering it. It was very good. All of them were awesome, but there's just one specific part in Deadbeat with Bob the Skull. If you've read it, you might know what I'm talking about. But I like cheered and laughed audibly when it happened. It was so awesome. Now getting into sci-fi, Red Rising, the number 2 series of all time on that list. I guess I didn't do a fantasy specific one. I just did series in general. So yeah, Red Rising. It was so good. And I'm talking about the first 3 books, the first trilogy. I have the next 2, but I'm waiting to hear any sort of word as to when the 6th book is going to come out, and then I'll start on Iron Gold, which is the next trilogy in that space. I just don't want to start it and then like it come out a year and a half, 2 years later, and I forget some stuff because I don't reread books. So anyway, Red Rising, it was so good, so high paced, very plot driven. There was elements of fantasy in there a little bit, but a lot of sci-fi. It got a little techie at times. It was just so good. I loved it, and the characters were still really awesome as well. I know a lot of people don't like first person POVs, but it really doesn't bother me. I like it to a certain degree. And yeah, Red Rising, I just couldn't put it down. Recursion, very high paced, very fun, very, I guess, I don't know, smart is one way. Very, I can't even think of the words right now, but it was high drama, thriller, sci-fi thriller, I guess you could call it. It was really good, and I recommended it to people, and they absolutely loved it as well. And the ending and how it all gets solved out, very well done. Fatal Alliance. This is one of the Star Wars EU books that I read. This was probably the longest one so far. A lot of action, a lot of things happening. I like to see the dynamics between Jedi, Sith, and Mandalorian, the power struggles and the team ups there. Very good in the Star Wars universe. All of them I liked for different reasons. I think Revan would have been a close second as well, just because it's really cool. You never in the movies, you never get in a Sith's head or see us from the Sith point of view, or like get them as like feel, get any sort of human perspective from them, which is nice in these books. And lastly, Tiamat's Wrath. This was the 7th book in the Expanse series. Just started the final book. It was so good. I took a long break from the Expanse series, but then I jumped back into it, and it just feels so right. I love the narration of it. I do the Expanse books through audiobook, and Jefferson Mays does such an awesome job narrating for the Expanse series. I highly recommend it. If I ever do a favorite audiobooks video, which I will eventually, these will definitely be on there. He is up there with James Marsters for the Dresden Files. I think he does a really awesome job with the Expanse. All right, now mystery and thrillers. The first one I'll say is And Then There Were None. And one of the main reasons why I put this one on there is because it was my introduction to Agatha Christie, and I read a second Agatha Christie book, also liked it, but the ending I had just had some issues with because of the whole unreliable narrator thing. And I would really like to get more into Agatha Christie, but And Then There Were None was very well done. It was very good book. Very quick read. I love those types of mysteries. Quick, high paced, keeps you on your toes going, and just it's a nice weekend read. So And Then There Were None. Nightmareland. This is probably more on the thriller horror side, but I just started getting into it, kind of fantasy too, I guess you would say. But I think horror and fantasy just share themes. Nightmareland. It just finished book 3 last night. It's fantastic. It's the prose and how he describes things and how you feel for these characters is just really good. And because they're novellas, they go really quick. So I will definitely be continuing this series in 2022. But Nightmareland was so good, and they're all on Kindle Unlimited. I highly recommend those because they're such quick reads, and you get sucked into the story and what's going on and into that world. Levy Alone, I really enjoyed book 1. It is very dark. It does have some pretty, I guess, sickening and like moments, really dark moments, but it was really done well. And I continued to the second book, which was also good. The first one was probably the best. Also on Kindle Unlimited. These are on Kindle Unlimited audio as well for Levy Alone, but it is a really good dark mystery if you like that sort of things. And Vigilante Justice, I would also say. Black Coral, another one on audiobook. This was book 2 in the Underwater Investigations series. Really good mysteries. Again, murder mysteries, but these, there's typical murder mysteries where you're just trying to solve the killer or find the killer, but there's second layers into this. There's deeper meanings. There's, in this one, there's like government corruption on top of a murder and that they're trying to uncover. And then the second one has something like that as well. It's not just a murder that they're trying to solve. It's why that murder was happening, and who all is behind this larger picture. And finally, on to nonfiction. I only picked out 3 for these. Art of Resilience, such a good book. I highly recommend anybody to check this book out. It's a true story about the guy who swam around Great Britain in like 170 some days, swam around it. He did not touch land the entire time. He lived on the boat, swam like 12 hours a day. It is so good, and I recommend the audiobook. He narrates his own audiobook, and there are a lot of great moments. There's a lot of funny moments. His humor that he puts into it is awesome. Some of the stories that they have, absolutely hilarious. There's some really great life lessons. There's really great training and fitness and health lessons, and a lot of good research. A lot of the studies that he quotes that we've actually talked about and we've seen in a lot of other books. It is very, very good, and it's a great bridge into nonfiction, especially in like the health and fitness space. Next, Fiber Fueled. I try and consume a couple of nutrition books a year. Fiber Fueled was really, really good this year. And although it has a big asterisk caveat to me about the whole vegan element, because it was written by a vegan author, and like they just can't help themselves in putting their own opinions of why you should not be eating meat kind of stuff. Everything he says about fiber and diet and gut health and all that is fantastic, and is a great takeaway. And every nutrition book is going to have their bias, have their asterisks, but this one has so many other good things to it. I'll probably reread it eventually. Nonfiction is probably the only ones that I do reread because there's actually applicable things to learn. But fiber, how important it is, how important gut health is, always known that, but I highly recommend, especially if you want to get your nutrition dialed in. And last one is Art of Impossible. This is great for productivity and goals reaching and getting things done. And if you want to be more productive, if you want to achieve more goals, if you want to just be better in life, Art of Impossible is really, really good. So those are my top books of 2021. Kind of ran through them really, really quickly, but let me know if you've read any of these, or if you want to hear more about them. I also obviously would recommend all of these. I've probably talked about each of these several times throughout the year anyway. So yeah, let me know what are your top favorite books, whether it's in these categories or just in general. What were your top favorite books of the year? And I'd love to know and look them up and talk about them some more in the comments.